panelist. Our fifth panelist tonight is working from Presentation Mastery, Evaluation of Feedback, number 1. For well over 10 years, Angela Ritchey has served in all of the contest roles in person. When contests migrated to Zoom, Angela has served as chief judge, contest judge, and various supporting roles. While the roles are the same in both methods, Angela will be sharing tips to set members up for success in these roles in her speech entitled Chief Judge, Contest Judge, and Supporting Roles. Angela.
Thank you, Game Master. Contests, they are not just for speakers. As Roberta mentioned, it's a great opportunity to test out your speaking skills. And during this presentation, I'm going to be doing some callbacks to our previous presenters because they had a lot of great points that I think would be excellent to highlight. So my first callback will be to Roberta. Roberta mentioned it is critical to use that spreadsheet to fill out, and as well as doing the dry runs. I cannot stress that it is so critical to have that spreadsheet. One of the big differences with doing a contest in person versus doing it online is having that group of volunteers that you have. And you want to have more than just that, 5 mandatory judges that you need to have. You want to have a lot more on that, because what happened is that it's one thing when you're doing a contest in person and somebody doesn't show up and you can go up to somebody and go, hey, come here, I need your help. But when you're online, it's a bit different. You're sitting there going, who can I peg that I think would be great in this role? So having that list of volunteers up front and having some extras is great, because 1, you never know when there's going to be a technical issue, and 2, life just has its way of getting us in there and just derailing everybody's plans when they want to attend. When I was chief judge, I was so grateful that I had at least 2 backups, because I ended up using both backups as judges. It's very critical to have that. Another thing, and some of these are going to be overlapping for your other roles. As was mentioned, that spreadsheet, it is so important to have that. Make sure that you get email addresses and phone numbers for individuals, because one thing that will happen is some people are not tech savvy. And even though you have this intent of using this wonderful form, and I've discovered Google Forms is great for sharing results, not everybody is comfortable with it. And so you might have to work with them with emailing results or texting. Well, critical to do that. Another thing that's really important is early communication, and I can't stress that enough, is those dry runs are perfect opportunities to work a lot of things out up front. Because what will happen is you'll have people that are experienced, they have done contests online, so they know what they're doing. You may have people that have only done contests as functionary roles in person. And then you may have people that have not done any contest roles whatsoever. So you're going to have that mix of individuals with different experiences. So those dry runs are so critical, because you can sit around and you can have that very dynamic conversation between folks and get a lot of questions answered up front in that dry run. So that way people know what to expect coming out of it. The other thing I always felt was helpful, regardless of whether a contest is in person or in the Zoom sphere, is after you've had that dry run, is sit down and type up an email with everything that you talked about, especially stuff you want people to refer back to. For example, online, when you have your speaking order and you have your judges come in, send an email out and saying, this person is this judge. That way, when they come in, they already know what to expect as a result. When you come in right before that contest, it's always great to have that time in advance to go over some things again. Because what happens is you may have that dry run days before the contest. Well, people do sleep in between that dry run and the contest, and they may have forgotten something, or their life is so busy that even though you have this wonderfully scripted out email, they may have missed something in there. So it's great to have that reiteration of how you're doing things over again, particularly when you start talking about your forms. Google Forms, I have to admit, when I was chief judge, I thought it was great. Everybody loved it. It made it so easy for the judges to send their forms in because they said, this are my contestants that I really like. The ballot counters absolutely loved it because if you think about it, when everything's typed out, it is so much easier than going, well, I think this is what it looks like. So having that identified up front is a great thing to do. And also knowing how people want to communicate, whether they prefer communicating through text or through email. So if something happened, you know how to get a hold of them going back. So I can't stress that enough with that. So one of the other things about, and I know I keep talking about Google Forms, but the one thing that's really good about that is it has all the what I did is I typed out all the contestants' names, so it was really easy for folks to figure that out. So some things to figure about when you're a chief judge. And for those that may have never done that role before, and it may seem so overwhelming, guess what? You can sign up for a contest judge. This is a great opportunity, as Brian mentioned, to shadow somebody and at least see that different aspects. If that still seems a little unnerving, sign up for a ballot counter or a timer because you can see all those different aspects of those roles and feel more comfortable coming into it. So some tips and tricks for people that are judging that is always good. I know we always have this best intent with getting an environment. Always make sure you're distraction free because particularly when you're focused on evaluating somebody, is you want to have your focus clearly on them. So think about that. The other thing, whether you're a contest judge, your ballot counter, or timer, I know it's great to have those forms online, but sometimes that form may take over your screen. I always found that it's always good to have paper as a backup. That way, in case something happens to your form online, you know exactly where you left off. Also, it's also important to have that cell phone handy because if something happens and you're a judge and your screen freezes up, you can always back to the chief judge and say, hey, something's happened and I'll be back on as soon as possible. So that way we're not going, where did that person disappear to? Things to think about. For timers, a good tip when you're a timer is having those virtual flags already loaded on there. So like Sherry has, she's already got them loaded so that way it's easy to transition from one to another. Another thing that I found out, particularly it's really good in the Zoomosphere, is particularly with contests where you have that very quick window, like evaluations, where you've got that 30 seconds in between green and yellow and the red, is oftentimes it's good just to have that section where your virtual background is up. So that way it's really quick to switch from one to the other. So that way your contestant doesn't go over time. That's something to think about. And for ballot counters, make sure you attend, as I mentioned, for all of them, attend those dry runs. It's a great thing to do. And also for when it comes to ballot counting is how to expect it. I've been on numerous contests last year, and every chief judge had a completely different way of how they got their ballots, who they sent their ballots to, how you counted it. So it's vital to have that communication up front. So if all else fails and you forget everything that I've spoken about, communicate, and ask questions away. Back to you, Game Master.
Game over.